As with the latest coming in on Hong Kong, as the country's pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily has become a reader's favourite after its owner Jimmy Lai's arrest on Monday. Hong Kongers are now rushing to their nearest newsstand to buy a copy of the Apple Daily. As expected, the newspaper is now carrying a full-page picture of its owner Jimmy Lai being led away in handcuffs. The front page headline reads, "Apple will fight on." The newspaper says it has pumped up circulation from 70,000 to a whopping 550,000. Some Hong Kongers are paying advances so that others may buy the paper without spending any of their own money.
你尋日出咗呢單咁嘅新聞，你個個後生仔你都要睇咯，一定要睇。平時佢哋冇買開報紙，佢都話一定會嚟買咯。
Apple Media Group's shares also gained in Tuesday's trade. There was a buying frenzy at the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. At one point, Apple Media Group's shares were up by more than 1,000%. Jimmy Lai was arrested on Monday on charges of foreign collusion. His newsroom was raided by around 200 police officers in an operation that was broadcast live on social media.
琴日警方嘅行動根本係粗暴干預新聞自由。我一定今日所有香港人有良心嘅香港人一定要撐香港、撐蘋果，要支持香港。
And for more details on this news story, I'm joined in by our correspondent Richard Kimber, who's joining me live at this hour from Hong Kong. Richard, a very good afternoon to you. Now, considering it has not only strengthened the newspaper's resolve, but has also led to Lai's overnight transformation into a national hero, has Jimmy Lai's arrest backfired?
Well, from China's perspective and from the Hong Kong police's perspective, certainly not, because their investigation is still ongoing, and the latest details into that suggest that the arrest is actually part of a bigger investigation into attempts to try and crack down on an online group that has both been calling for sanctions to be imposed on Hong Kong and raising money overseas in order to be able to do that more effectively by garnering more lobbying power. So very much part of an ongoing process that the police and the government here say is very essential for ensuring the national security law does what it's supposed to do, which is to protect the city. There is some support for that in Hong Kong. There are some pro-government groups that have been applauding the arrest of Jimmy Lai, but certainly across the pro-democracy activists and across the public at large, there's been an outpouring of sympathy for Jimmy Lai, not least because he's been one of the few people who's still been an outspoken critic of the national security law and an outspoken critic of the government. And that's why you saw so many people queuing up to buy his newspaper, and also so many members of the public buying shares in his parent company that owns that newspaper in the last couple of days. So certainly on a very local level, you could say that perhaps, yes, it looks like it's backfired because there's been this well of support for him and for the things that he's been saying. But whether or not it ends up being necessarily a mistake to arrest him, of course, will depend very much on how that investigation proceeds and what the charges are and so on. But the international community certainly seems to be rallying behind the pro-democracy voice here and effectively rallying behind Jimmy Lai.
I'm actually going to be coming to that. Since you mentioned the international community, how has the global community now reacted to the recent arrests and also the heightened attacks on the city's freedom?
Well, the arrest, like so many things in Hong Kong, has ended up escalating into a much bigger diplomatic row. And there's been criticism from the US with regards to the arrest from Mike Pompeo. There's been criticism from UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson with regards to the arrest. In these cases, China, as usual, has criticised back and said, please stay out of Chinese affairs. This is a Hong Kong issue and it's not for international discussion. The Chinese embassy in the UK specifically criticising Boris Johnson for commenting on the issue at all. So again, this has developed into a much bigger diplomatic row, despite the fact that from the government's point of view here, this is nothing more than a domestic arrest of somebody who's under investigation by the police. But it's very difficult for Hong Kong during this current political climate to not end up being wrapped up in the bigger challenge that's taking place between the US and China. And this arrest is another perfect example of how something has escalated very quickly from a domestic affair into an international hot potato.
Absolutely, and we'll have to wait and watch and see how this movement actually pans out as far as these arrests are concerned. They seem to have had quite an impact on international politics as well. Thank you so much, Richard, for bringing us all the latest from Hong Kong.